There's this big pile of red bricks on the other side of the Thames from Kingston. It's usually known as Hampton Court Palace and was originally built by an archbishop in the 1500s named Cardinal Wolsey, who was an extremely rich man. Storytellers like to say his was a rags to riches tale, but really it was a fairly wealthy to a massively wealthy tale. As far as I can make out, on top of several church incomes, much of his wealth came from scams and bribes related to his control over the king's tax-gathering machinery. In those days, kings were supreme mafia dictators with almost total power over the population, its laws and finances. Wolsey got really rich by helping keep his boss ultra-rich, no matter how much money he blew. This boss, however, was Henricus VIII, who had issues with his own lack of male issue. Henricus's first wife, Catalina, had originally been married to Henricus's late brother Arthur, but she wasn't producing viable sons. Henricus decided that this marriage was simply incestuous, which explained his lack of a male heir, and he tried to get it annulled by the Pope, whose main man in England happened to be Cardinal Wolsey. But Wolsey couldn't twist the Pope's ear because Catalina was a member of the Holy Roman Imperial family. This disagreement fortunately led to the Church of England's separation from the Papal Church, but was rather less than fortunate for Cardinal Wolsey's standing with Henricus VIII. He was not exactly forced to hand over Hampton Court Palace as a gift to Henricus, presumably calculating that it would be somewhat better for his health to lose a palace than to lose a head. Henricus went on in his usual obese way to make issues with a number of other queens, and his successor monarchs would expand the palace with red brick modifications and extensions. Elizabeth I had smallpox at Hampton Court Palace, which didn't exactly do wonders for her complexion, but I'd be surprised if she hadn't entertained some of her pet gangster terrorists there, such as Sir Francis Drake, Sir John Hawkins, Sir Walter Raleigh, and Sir Richard Greville. Over time, the royals lost interest in Hampton Court Palace, and it was used as grace and favour apartments for old royal servants, not exactly a retirement home. Increasingly, trainloads and coachloads of school children and tourists would pay to visit the old pile and gawp at its grotesquely luxurious interior decor. Between the palace itself and Kingston Bridge is a largish deer park and a long rectangular piece of water. On the other side of the palace is the suburban district of East Molesey and then West Molesey. Throughout much of the 20th century, and maybe before then, people from East Molesey and beyond would each morning cut through some outbuildings to the north of the palace into its back garden and then through a large gate left unlocked into the deer park. There was a superb walk along a wide tree-lined path to Kingston Bridge and then onto work or to school. In the late afternoons, these many hundreds would do the reverse journey, whatever the season or the weather. Tourists visiting the palace would also use the gate to visit the deer park, many eating their sandwiches there. Then the snooty tourist authority, Historic Royal Palaces, took the palace away from the people of East Molesey, sealing off the gate with its easy access to the deer park and their traditional route to school and to work. Another entrance was enabled, but we plebs had to detour through a few hundred metres of rush-hour exhaust fumes to reach it, followed by a narrow fenced path that didn't even point towards Kingston. People quickly preferred to use buses and cars to get to work and to school. The deer park isn't much used by locals these days, though a few hardy regulars, mainly from the Kingston end, take their dogs there to deposit somewhat less than fragrant biological substances. The Red Brick Palace has become a prison island for tourists and the occasional special event, almost entirely separate from its local human environment, who have also had the deer park effectively decapitated from them. It's been years since there were Grace and Favour residents living in the palace, and the Tourist Authority is very keen to point out how cold and draughty the apartments were. But they could be done up. I see no reason why retired men and women from the armed services with nowhere else to go couldn't be housed in them. They wouldn't have to wear silly costumes like the beefeaters, but if it was known they lived there, their presence, seen or unseen, would serve as a discreet security deterrent. Some could even be trained as first aiders for tourists overwhelmed by the ostentatious royal bad taste of the palace interior. Plus, there's got to be some way of restoring the traditional foot access to Kingston Bridge for Molesey locals. If this pattern of life hasn't been eternally shattered, the deer park could probably come back to life. Then perhaps more people would get to glimpse, out of the corner of their eye, the mossy flank and proud, alien, unwavering gaze of the green stag, disappearing the moment he is noticed.